Chapter 1771. Gather the Fluffy Minions. My loyal fluffy minions, gather around. Today, Sister Kara is going to spread the blessings of the Carl. Ophelia groaned in anticipated mental agony as the bunnies giggled, before coming to stand before Kara. The Were-Bear didn't quite understand why they had no aversion to the Chaos Badger, but she suspected that it was either the fluffy ears or the fact that Kara only touched people when she was robbing them. And the bunnies didn't have anything to take, so they always got cupcakes. You're going to teach us all the helpful skills? One of the bunnies asked.
Yep.
Carl is busy and I can use the skill, so I will help everyone get what they want. The first thing to do is to write the skill that you want, so I don't start handing out ones that aren't right. Before we know the options?
Exactly.
If you could have anything, what would you want? And then I will give you what I can, and improvise the rest. Those were dangerous words coming from Kara. Ophelia knew. The bunnies quickly made a spreadsheet with a bunch of options on it, a much more organized method than Kara's initial thought of just having them all write down an answer individually. That was not how the species usually operated. They liked doing everything as a group. If there were other bunnies around, everything was better, and they could share the workload of whatever they were asked to do. Shared work meant fast work, which meant everyone was happier. The list was handed to Kara, and the badger smiled. This was going to be so much easier than expected. Fully 2/3 of the answers were either cooking or teleporting to things. There were some other answers, like helping make stuff and art, but none of them seemed too difficult for her to manage. All right, we will do the big groups first. Since Lotus is here and wiggling excitedly, let's do the cooking team now. Wiggling excitedly was apparently code for trying to escape from Ophelia so she could hug the bunnies, they decided. But Lotus wasn't making much headway, as the Were-Bear had picked her up and the priestess' feet couldn't reach the ground. The bunnies who wanted to get cooking skills gathered at the front, and Kara made a grand gesture as she activated, "Follow me, little one." The benevolent badger Kara offers knowledge skill. Mystic cooking will be transferred to many bunnies. The recipients cheered as the new skill settled in, and then they all froze as the system's class selection menu activated. That was exactly what the badger had been hoping for, and what Ophelia had been afraid would happen. Now that the bunnies had a class, what would become of them? And what sort of system would you get if your only skill was cooking? Were there dedicated chef-type classes? Because she could see the bunnies being happy to get one. After most of a minute, the first bunnies began to come back to their senses, and Kara found herself pulled into a surprisingly powerful hug, then spun in circles. Thank you so much, sister. We've got a class. A real class. This is going to be so wonderful. We will be the best bunnies ever. Kara laughed as she checked the bunnies' pockets, then inserted a carefully wrapped cupcake. You're already the best bunnies ever. I don't think that you need to worry about proving yourselves. Now, what class did you get? Mystic Chef. So, there was a class for it. One of the other bunnies frowned. You got to pick chef? I didn't get a chef option. I got a whole bunch of options to choose from, but they were all the common ones that humans get. Kara inspected the bunny and saw that she was now a cleric class. Well, the bunny goddess needs priestesses. So, someone had to do it. How many of you are now clerics of the bunny goddess?
Kara asked.
About 1/3 of the hands went up. And how many are a variation of chefs? Almost all of the others. I got gardener. I guess that's almost like chef, but with more getting the best ingredients? I still have the mystic cooking skill, one of the few other bunnies offered. That's valuable too. We always need gardeners. Look at all the crops growing here, and most of them are edible if they're not alchemy reagents. Can I change my vote? One of the waiting bunnies asked. I don't actually know what will trigger the gardener class. We can try with a plant growth skill, but it might leave you with weird class options and an excellent ability in the garden. The bunny considered that, then nodded. I will take my chances if growing food with magic is an option. Kara gave her a cheeky thumbs up as she prepared her next activation, and Ophelia smiled as the bunnies rearranged themselves. There were more who wanted to be gardeners, but hadn't known it was an option. Honestly, Kara would likely let them be nearly anything that they asked. Just for the entertainment value. All right, second big group, come forward. You all wanted to be able to instantly fetch things by teleporting to them, right? I know just the skill for that. Ophelia frowned. This was not going to end well. Benevolent Badger Kara offers knowledge, skill, Shadow Step, will be transferred to many bunnies. The bunnies cheered as they found that they had a skill to fetch things. Then, they also went into the class selection menu. While we wait for them, who wanted to be a gardener? We can do that now. A bunch of hands went up, and Kara activated Follow Me, Little One again. Benevolent Badger Kara offers knowledge, skill, advanced plant growth, will be transferred to many bunnies. Lotus stopped her struggling and laughed. The green dragon she was bonded to was laughing hysterically as Kara activated that skill, so she knew that something amazing was about to happen. She just didn't know what. Chapter 1772, Advanced Bunnies. The bunnies who got advanced plant growth entered the class selection menu just as the second group, who had received Shadow Step, began to come back to their senses. Are you sure that this is right? I don't think that bunnies are supposed to get rogue-type classes, one of them asked. Kara patted her on the shoulder, stretching up to reach so high on the bunny. Rogue doesn't mean bad person, it means sneaky person. That's what you wanted, right? To be able to just come and go as you pleased, filling orders instantly, and then vanishing before anyone can bother you. The bunny thought about it. That's actually right. Did I have the wrong impression of rogues? Probably not. But you're bunnies and they're humans. There are different standards. Comparing yourself to them sets the standard far too low. Bunnies are much better people on average. The bunnies giggled at the flattery, and a few of them vanished to go practice their new skills. Now, we had the group who wanted to help make stuff. Would you like rune crafting or earth manipulation? Do you want to make helpful stuff or the base for helpful stuff as your specialty? Can we learn to make the base later? One of the bunnies asked, catching on to how Kara's mind worked. You certainly can. It will likely be one of your class skills or in your skill tree. Then please help us make helpful and interesting things. Benevolent Badger Kara offers knowledge, skill, rune crafting, will be transferred to many bunnies. The bunnies cheered, then scrunched their faces up, willing the class selection message to come more quickly. The sight was absolutely adorable, and even Ophelia felt a smile creep onto her face at their eagerness. They were trying to be more helpful, and had no idea that Kara was setting them up on a path that would make them among the most powerful mortal crafters alive, and on a path that would lead them to immortality. The bunnies slowly returned to reality with their new classes, and Kara noticed that she had inadvertently created a small imbalance among the population. They had numerous rogues, nearly a third of the population, and quite a few druids and clerics as well, as that seemed to be common for the gardeners and cooks. Now, there were only a small group of bunnies left waiting for classes. What did the rest of you want? There weren't too many other things on the list. Kara asked. We want to do art. Making the world pretty. A bunny in the larger group of the remaining bunnies explained. Kara nodded. I think I have the right thing for you. I don't know a skill that specifically makes your art skills better, but I do know one that will help you make art faster. Before Ophelia could stop her, Kara had activated the skill again, and the bunnies now had the Reality Warp skill. They settled into the class selection menu, and Kara turned to the last pair. What was it that you wanted? It has to be special if you didn't go with the group. We want to be warriors. Bunnies that can defend bunnies from predators. Kara, Ophelia warned.
What?
It's going to work. Making warriors is stupidly easy. There is no possible way that I could fail to make warriors. That wasn't quite what Ophelia's concern was. She was more concerned that Kara was going to do something crazy after showing at least a modicum of restraint with the other groups. All right, combat bunnies. Combat bunnies. That's right, the Carl knows a skill to make combat bunnies. Now Ophelia was very concerned. However, if she tried to stop the process, Kara would just do it later, when she had more time to plan and plot. Right, I need to make this a combination effort. The question is, what one comes first? Both. Naturally. Kara used the two skills at the same time, layering evolution on top of Follow Me Little One, granting the bunnies an evolved form and war beast at the same time. If that didn't make a warrior bunny, she didn't know what would. The pair vanished from sight, hidden by the system, as they finished their selection. That seemed like a good sign to Kara. It wouldn't hide them if she didn't do something interesting. The pair reappeared a moment later, but looked drastically different than they had a moment ago. They were still adorable, with long fluffy ears. But they were now placed on either side of a set of thin antlers, similar to what Kara would expect on a deer. "Did you become warriors?" she asked, already knowing the answer from their name tag colors. "We got the Blood Knight class, and it evolved us into a new species. We're now Bloodstrike jackalopes. That's an even better sort of bunny, I think. And we've got antlers. I saw them in the avatars of the class selection." The other bunnies rushed over to touch their horns, intrigued by the fact that their friends had evolved into something that was distinctly more dangerous than a standard bunny, while still being a bunny. "That is amazing. What skills did you get?" one of the cooks asked. "I got an innate skill called Bloodstrike, which causes crippling agony on bad people. And then I got the Blood Knight skills of Rend, Life Leech, and Strength." The others were shocked and scandalized by the idea of combat bunnies. However, they couldn't deny that the two of them would be wonderful guards for the group. The bunnies normally couldn't count on any sort of protection at all. But if they had their own warriors, then the burrow was definitely going to be safe. "Well, now we've got everything, I think. We've got all the basic skills covered, thanks to Sister Kara. And we've got combat-capable protectors. Do you think that they're going to be strong enough to do actual combat things?" Kara laughed. "The Carl made a training tower here in the tiny world that you can use while you're still mortal. Perhaps we should ask Thor and Tessa to teach you combat forms? Then you can use a sword like a proper Blood Knight." The jackalopes nodded. "That would be amazing. Let's go find Mr. Thor and his mate. Girls, come with us, so we have someone to watch the eggs for her." Chapter 1773. Leveraged Promotion. The first of the members who wanted to try the transfer arrived in the new territory just after Kara upgraded the bunnies. That kept Carl from coming to see them, though Dana and the others all returned to help the bunnies adapt to being equal members of society. They could tell the elders later. Min arrived with the first group after dark, looking skeptical about whatever story the warehouse elder had given her to get her here. It was clear that she thought she was about to be pranked or to get bad news. But she had come anyhow. "Boss, you needed to see me?" Elder Douglas smiled in a way that instantly put the green dragon on guard. "I did. You see, we are opening a new branch of the warehouse, and I would like to promote you to branch manager to control operations here. It's not quite on the level of a warehouse elder, but you would be second only to me in the hierarchy, free to hire and fire staff for your branch." As Carl had expected, the elder was thoroughly washing his hands of the situation and only willing to be involved in keeping track of inventory. "You want me to be a warehouse manager? How is that a promotion? I'm already a manager." "No, a branch manager. You'll be in charge of this entire location, and you can hire your own managers to work under you. Then, once you've advanced enough, the clan is willing to promote you directly to elder." Min looked tempted, but there was another factor that Elder Douglas had forgotten to account for. The Darklight host had just upgraded the living quarters for the bunnies that worked in the warehouse area, and that gave the Green Dragon an excuse to use the bunnies' break room, which included the male bunny gargoyles. It wasn't as good as real bunnies, but the men were very realistic and very friendly. "You won't be missing out. You have Carl right here, and he can arrange the warehouse and its functions exactly as you want. If there is something that you will miss from the other location, I'm sure that we can arrange it. Plus, there is a permanent portal array linked between the two, so you don't even have to move if you don't want to." For a druid like Min, it wasn't a big deal to activate the array twice a day. And she likely wouldn't need to. If they were opening shops here, there would be a rush at shift change, and the portal would already be open. So, she wouldn't have to leave her apartment, which she had decorated just how she wanted it. "Does that mean that Carl and the others are moving here?" Carl shook his head. "I will be keeping our house in the clan compound. We've got a guild house here, but it's not a hassle for me to move back and forth between the two. Most of the elders are at the clan compound, so I expect to need to be there fairly often. Plus, Leo goes to school there. He doesn't want to leave all his friends, and Kara still sometimes attends classes. So, they'll be in the compound most days." which means I will have to be there most days as well, to apologize to whoever offended Kara for the day. The elders chuckled. That pretty much described the situation. Kara didn't start too much trouble. However, when someone started trouble with her, it rapidly escalated beyond manageable. Well, that works. This place is too far for a lot of us to want to relocate, but I see that you've gotten a pretty good collection of members wanting to be here. I will accept the branch manager position, but I have conditions. We need a break room. And we need fluffy helpers. You'd better have bunnies for me, or I'm going on strike. Carl laughed. I can do the break room. However, the Blackwoods pack has joined the Darklight host, and you know how bunnies feel about lichens. So, I propose that instead of having bunnies do the running, we can have juvenile lichens do the job. Min wasn't fully sold on the idea. Elder Douglas had no intentions of playing fair, though. He pushed one of the lichen girls, about 14 years old, forward to greet Min. Hi. I promise, we can run the warehouse orders to the front just as easily as the bunnies. We're really fast and my memory is great. I'll do good work for you, Lady Min. Min smiled at the girl, and then shot the elder a dirty look for his cheap trick. He knew what cute fluffy things pleading did to green dragons. The promise of young lichens running around the warehouse was especially appealing because they were social by nature and did not shy away from affection like the bunnies did, which was exactly why the elders of the pack had suggested them for the job. Fine, I will take over this branch. But only because Carl promised to make me the perfect break room. The same as the other one?
Carl asked.
Well, without the bunnies, I suppose that we can add some variety. Min conceded. All right, I will have Opal and Lotus come up with a plan, then run it by you in the morning. The elders chuckled at the thought. There were so many things that could go wrong if you let that Fae and anyone aligned with the Green Dragons work together on a private space. Most of them didn't know Lotus, though she had appeared in the clan to do some healing. But they had heard the name from some of the annoyed clan members who had been victims of the other healer's new resurrection strategy that put them in children's bodies when their souls were damaged. In the tiny world, Opal sensed her name being spoken. A new break room for Min and the lichen pups in the warehouse? She could do that. Chapter 1774. Let Min see. Before Min could even go to see what the warehouse looked like at this new location, Opal was already there, working on upgrades to the storage, the break room, and the front counter area to make them all better for the staff. The front counter area was the easy part. Opal simply made it look like the old counter areas, but added a few niceties that she knew that the Green Dragon would appreciate. For one, there was no more hard tile behind the counter. Instead, it had a squishy rubber floor that was heated and soft on the feet, while still being easy to clean. The warehouse was organized as ever, but Opal modified the ladders used to collect items from higher shelves. They still had the steps up either side, so you could easily retrieve anything, but the space in the middle where the old ones still had fresh paint, as nobody walked there, were replaced with static-free slides. That way, the lichens could run up, grab the goods, and slide back down. If that didn't make the day more fun, they were simply incapable of joy. The shelving units were standardized, the same as the ones that Opal had found in the other warehouse, so that finding everything would be easy. She even labeled the shelves the same way, so that Min didn't have to make a new organizational chart. But the real bonus was in how she recreated the break room. This time, they didn't have a whole warehouse full of adult bunny girls. They had Min and a bunch of teens, plus whoever else Min hired. So, Opal put in the lunchroom, the spa, with an emphasis on fur treatment, and then added quiet study areas, nap spaces, and a games room. The bunnies weren't big on things like billiards or foosball, but the lichens were. They loved games that tested precision and coordination, so those two were perennial favorites in the pack. Now, all that was left was to add a few finishing touches. Some handsome and muscular young lichen golems, a few bunny males, and one super fluffy spirit bear mascot, in case Min was having a rough day and needed something to cuddle. They were definitely going to give her at least a few of those as she tried to organize all the new things that the Darklight host was going to be making for the clan. Armor, weapons, trinkets, accessories. All of them needed to be sorted and organized into the inventory. In essence, she had become their personal warehouse manager. But Opal realized that there was actually an easier way for them to do things than to simply dump the goods on Min and make her sort them. So, she created a magical display that would show the contents of the Darklight Host Guild store. When they brought over items for Min to put in the clan warehouse, all they had to do was put them into the stock section of the store, not for sale, and then let Min read the listings. It was all sorted in advance, with system-approved values. Hopefully, she would be able to make it display sale prices in clan credits. But if not, she could translate from whatever currency it showed her the prices in. The clan warehouse wasn't technically open to anyone who wasn't a member, so they did all their business in clan credits. However, there were cases when an elder agreed to trade an item to outsiders, so there should be some system in place to convert between currencies. With the basics done, Opal stared at her handiwork and resisted the urge to put a charm on the floor that would randomly lick the bottom of your feet if you walked on it barefoot. It would be hilarious the first few times, but then she'd need to take it down, or it would just be annoying. It was better to use as a surprise than a permanent feature. Min, Carl, and Elder Douglas reached the warehouse, intending to show Min around and let her get things set up the way that she wanted, only to find that it had been completely renovated by a very smug Opal already.
Min,
Come take a look. I can still alter it if you've got more ideas, but I think it's close to perfect. First, we have the smooth floors out there, with a textured surface so they're never slippery but easy to mop. Then, behind the counter, we have this nice soft rubber floor. Try it, it should take all the stress out of standing for a shift. I also hid stools under the counter, just swing them out when you want to sit. Min laughed as Elder Douglas winked at her. It was a running joke that there were no stools in the warehouse because it allowed the shorter members to hide behind the counter when people came in. If they were seated at a set height, they would be spotted immediately. But if they were sitting on the floor, they wouldn't be spotted, and most of the clan members would simply wait at the counter until the clerk finished their snack, or finished counting the last inventory sheet that they were working on. Because Opal duplicated the counter design from the old warehouse, they could still do that here, but with a much softer floor. This looks lovely. Did you keep the same warehouse? I even kept the same row and aisle setup. It's exactly the same size and layout. But check this out. I put in slides for the runners so they don't have to run down the steps anymore. Elder Douglas laughed. That is definitely a safety hazard. And they're not supposed to be running on the steps. Min shrugged. They were going to do it anyhow. Getting the orders filled as fast as possible was a point of pride for the bunnies. Now, I had to alter the break room, but we've still got a spa. Ooh, that's what I should add. Perhaps a nice dragonkin masseur to help work out all those tense muscles and give your scales a good polish. Elder Douglas cleared his throat. Miss Opal, this is still a family-friendly workplace. Don't worry. It's all very wholesome. Chapter 1775. Min Needs Clerks. Min and Elder Douglas followed Opal into the break room, which looked normal at first, with a Leakin in sweatpants brewing coffee and a tray of fruits and baked treats on one of the tables. Have a seat if you're hungry. The coffee is almost ready. The Leakin-shaped gargoyle greeted them. We will come back for coffee and a snack. We need to check out the rest of the break room facilities that Miss Opal created. Elder Douglas informed him. Of course. Everything is up and running, ready for guests if you've got time to stop. If not, we can have one of the staff give you the grand tour. That would be lovely, thank you. The gargoyle nodded, and a female bunny break room assistant darted out of the back rooms to guide them through the rest of the space. Let's start with the games room, and then we will work our way back around. See, we know that a lot of the workers will be students, so we put in study areas and games that Lycans like and some nice quiet rooms for a nap, in case it's too loud to study at home. But those are all just minor, unimportant things. Look at this selection of hair dye. Min laughed as she realized that the gargoyles Opal created did not have the same personality that the ones other people made did. Somehow, they were more true to the source material, and the racks full of hair dye and nail polish were as important to the bunny guiding them as the nap rooms, which put them a step ahead of the games room, which the bunnies didn't really care about. Now, those are the basic amenities, the ones that are the actual break room part of the break room. But the most important employee amenity is here in the spa. Because we've got fully furred Lycans on the staff, there are extensive private rooms, for a fully body shampoo, for dye or other styling treatment. However, we have nail stations, massage tables, a standard barber and stylist, as well as a sauna, hot tub, and public bath. Gender segregated, of course, because this is a family-friendly establishment. Elder Douglas laughed at the clearly rehearsed line. He suspected that anything made by Opal was far from family-friendly. But these were gargoyles, so there was little threat of them doing anything inappropriate. They weren't living beings, just constructs that resembled them. Or so he assumed. With illusionary domain, reality warp, and gargoyle working together, there was very little of the original spell left to these, other than the base instincts and combat power that it imparted on a solid construct. That was the important part to Opal. They needed to be able to defend the break room, but they also had to be durable enough that if there was some sort of work to be done, they could do it without the illusionary domain being put under additional stress. Well, I think that I've seen enough of the employee amenities. It looks like the Fae thought of the staff when she created this place, and there is nothing out of the ordinary here. It's the same as the room in the other warehouse was described to me by the bunnies. All right, I will give my approval to this layout. It fits clan standards, and we won't have to come up with a whole new organizational system. That will save a lot of time training if we transfer others over to work here. Now, I should get back to the clan, and so should the other elders. They've been gone long enough, outdoing a dungeon and throwing a party instead of attending to their duties back home. With that, the warehouse elder unceremoniously abandoned them and went to find Elder Socrate, who could give him a portal trip back home. The rest of this could be someone else's problem, and he was going home to sleep. There was a good reason that he was the warehouse elder, and it was not so that he could accompany people like Elder Alex out on adventures. Min smiled at Opal. Well, that's that. Now, I just need to recruit some of your guild members to come here and work for me until I can get another trained clerk. Opal winked at the dragon. You know, this whole place is an illusionary domain. You don't actually
Need
to hire real workers. I can just add them to the illusion. Why don't we start you with one of those assistants, and you can find the Leakin children to do the running? Not that there is anything to run yet. Carl still needs to start guiding the adults in their new trade skills. Min nodded reluctantly. Are you sure that they can be trusted to do the job? Opal smiled. The gargoyles will protect the warehouse and its contents with their lives. Not only will they protect the place and do their jobs well, they also won't hand out deals to their friends, or slip a little extra into the order for a cut on the side. Min giggled. Everyone in the warehouse cut side deals for their friends, even if it was just a discount. That was part of the advantage of having a friend at the warehouse. But many prices are negotiable.
Can they do that?
Opal flitted in a circle around the room, spreading streaks of light behind her. Yes, I think they can manage that. They don't have personal attachments, so it will be impartial, based on how much the item cost. But I can give them their own personalities, so that people will develop their favorite to deal with. Perfect. All right, make me a couple of front counter assistants that can fill the role until I hire more people. Opal waved her hand in a grand gesture, and 2 clerks in the standard uniform of the new home merchant clan's warehouse appeared. One was a petite elven woman, while the other was a 250-centimeter tall polar bear werebear. Huge and fluffy, with soft white fur, but the head of a predator. As Opal well knew, it was a combination of fluffy and dangerous that every green dragon would struggle to resist. Chapter 1776. Everyone needs something. While Opal was busy in the warehouse, Carl and the elders were busy making sure that everything was set up for the first day here in the new territory. They had checked the school, which was running smoothly already, just changing locations and using the new materials that had been provided. But the shops were coming online much faster than the elders had expected. With everything destroyed, many of them were short on stock. But everyone kept supplies and some product in their inventory, so they hadn't lost everything. The runecrafters were their next stop, as they needed guidance to be able to effectively use their skills. Knowing the language could get them a start, but without any leadership, it would be all trial and error to find out what actually worked and what combinations would lead to desired effect, and what could be left out to save space without losing effectiveness. And with so little to their names, the Blackwoods pack needed as much as they could get this month. It was perfect for everyone, as the new home also needed uncommon and rare grade items, like they assumed the new runecrafters would make. It was the most affordable of gear, to fill the trade ships. Elder Malcolm's area, the docks and the outlying regions of the clan compound, had taken the worst damage of anything during the battle, and while they had made some efforts to repair the area and refloat some of the sunken ships, there was a lot left to do. With damaged magical ships in the harbor, they couldn't get anything in or out until they were fixed. That was a real issue for the trade, part of the guild's name, and there weren't any suitably deep bays nearby for them to create an alternate dock. There was a very small one at the former Hyperion Sex territory, but that would not keep up with everything that moved through the city. It also would fix the clan's reputation as a reliable trading partner. Technically, they didn't owe the merchants who lost their ships in the crossfire. They had paid them out of the collected resources of the defeated clans, but most of the wealth had been looted before they got there. So, there wasn't much to go around, and some of the ships had been so heavily damaged that their cargo holds were destroyed. The Blue Elves had managed to repair and float their ship already, and it had left with most of its supplies intact, suffering only minor losses, beyond a week down, and the materials for repairs. They did plan to return after a trip to an elven repair facility, where they could get back to full capability. Elder Malcolm didn't ask where that was, but they likely wouldn't tell him anyhow. That wasn't how they worked, and their home base was likely to be a pirate-controlled territory. Not somewhere that they could just go and look for a captain. If they weren't ready to receive the elves when they came back, they would put a new spot on their trade route, and that would cost the clan a solid customer, who was willing to pay good prices for goods that others in the region weren't interested in. The majority of the merchants wanted the raw materials that the clan gathered. They didn't buy much for magical items. So, the clan bought and sold goods both from inland and from the trade ships, giving them a way to find higher-paying customers for nearly anything, without having many craftsmen in their own clan. Recovering from the attacks had been harder on him than any of the other elders. None of their major buildings had been damaged, other than his docks. It was the residential areas that had it worst during the attacks. So, he was alone in his suffering. So, when he got a message that Carl had recruited a Leakin pack that had gained the runecrafting skill, it was a great opportunity for him. As the other elders were getting ready to head back, including a reluctant Elder Socrate, who was happy to stay with Remy and work on the greenhouses that they were building in the new town. They would be good for both the food supply and the alchemists. Dealing with Elder Socrate was an art that the other elders had mastered decades ago, though. Elder Socrate, you've been gone for days, and there is nobody there to do quality control for the apprentices, or to make sure that the counter is counting the pills properly by grade. Elder Douglas reminded him. That was all that it took to get the alchemy elder moving. Carl had promised a portal array, so he could come back in a few days and check on the greenhouses once the plants were properly rooted and hopefully growing well. Remy had used a lot of magic on the greenhouse, including multiple weather control spells, so it should be fine. But you couldn't leave things to chance in a new territory with unpredictable mana flows. Carl, have you seen the kids? I need to find them, so we can get volunteers for the back rooms of the warehouse. Min asked, with a wave for the elders, who were still trying to get Socrate to stop talking about plants and leave the greenhouse. Yep, they're at the bakery with Leo. Well, the younger ones, anyhow. I don't know where all the older ones went. I think that they're throwing a party for Lucille, Elder Blackwood's daughter. She got the Golem Mage class the other day, and they haven't had a chance to celebrate since. If you find that party, you'll find all the kids the right age to be running goods in the warehouse. That gave Min direction. How hard could it be to find a bunch of teenage lichens? They were almost certainly in the woods, trying to pretend that their parents hadn't noticed them sneaking away to party unsupervised. Chapter 1777. Find the Teens. Min left to go find the Lichen teens, but only made it one block before she was sidetracked. There was a large group of pre-teen lichens arguing about ice cream flavors in front of the bakery, which apparently offered a dozen different flavors to be served alongside their pies, or in a dish alone. That was enough to stop the Green Dragon's mission to find fluff for the warehouse, at least for a moment. Seeing the situation, she crouched down next to young ones, who looked like their discussion was about to come to blows. Now, there's no need to fight. I bet that if we ask nicely, they can sell you one of each, And you can share so that you can compare. Everyone has their own favorites. There really isn't a best ice cream flavor for everyone. The little one at her left frowned. No, chocolate is definitely the best flavor. He always does this. Mom says that we can split an ice cream, but he only ever wants chocolate. Just chocolate every single time, the other complained. Min thought about the solution for a moment and then smiled. Let me talk to them. I think there is an answer. Min went to the counter and flagged down the clerk. Do you have Neapolitan ice cream? I don't know what that is. Oh, it's chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry together in one tub. So you get some of each. The Leakin looked intrigued at the concept, but shook her head. That's the first I've heard of it. But we have a swirl flavor. Half raspberry, half chocolate. I will take that one, please. Just a single serve bowl. The little one's mother wouldn't appreciate it if she gave them more sugar than approved. It was still the first day. She could spoil the fluffy things later. She paid the clerk and brought out the bowl with 2 small wooden spoons. Here, try this. It's called a swirl dish. Half raspberry, half chocolate. So, you both get different flavors with just 1 dish of ice cream. When you get bigger, your mom will likely approve 2 scoops, and you can ask for different ones. Thank you, friendly lady. My name is Min. I work at the warehouse over there. Do you know where the older kids went? I want to hire some of them to work delivering packages from the warehouse. They went to the shore to celebrate Lucille's class awakening. Thanks. Consider that ice cream payment for the information. Min patted the 2 fluffy heads and then ran off to go find the party near the shore before the Lycans began to split off, and she had to track them down individually to get employees. She was not willing to miss out on this chance. It wasn't hard to find the pups at the shore, as they were playing the drums and singing. She could hear them before she even left town, so perhaps the Lycans weren't actually trying to hide from their parents, just looking for a fun place to party. That was different from the humans that she was used to. The human kids always try to sneak off to do things without their parents knowing, but the Lycan kids didn't try at all. It wasn't hard to guess why. A party was loud, and the Lycans had even better hearing than she did. They would have to go 10 kilometers or more from town for their parents to not hear them, and in strange territory, that was not safe. So, they stayed close, but went out of sight, where they could have a proper celebration, and Lucille could show off her golems. They were large werewolves, which the Lycans considered lesser cousins of their lineage. The species came from an entirely different source, but the Lycans considered them to be half-human versions of Lycans, as they were either human-looking or completely wolves, where the Lycans were wolf-headed and furred, but bipedal. As a dragon, Min somewhat understood the bias toward half-humans. The Dragonkin were generally considered lesser forms of the dragon lineage as well. So, while the werewolves were actually cursed humans, not part Lycan at all, they got the same treatment. When she reached the beach, the teenage Lycans were playing tag with the 8 werewolf golems, who were remarkably agile. The music continued, and the pups were singing what sounded like a marching tune, giving the others a rhythm to move to as they dodged the golems' attempts to tag them. It was more of a military training exercise than a game in Min's mind, but this was the sort of thing that Lycans liked. Min went to stand by the drummers, and Lucille waved to her, then brought a few people over to meet her. Guys, this is Min. She will be running the new Home Clan warehouse, and she's willing to hire us to run goods from the shelves. Min nodded. It's good paying work, but a lot of running, so we wanted younger Lycans. The warehouse in the clan compound uses bunnies for it, but you know how they are about Lycans. The kids sighed. Such a shame. Lycans love bunnies, but they hate us. That wasn't exactly the case. The bunnies were absolutely terrified of the Lycans, and the Lycans didn't love the bunnies as much as they loved to chase them around like prey. The Lycans saw no issue with this, as they weren't intending to harm the bunnies when they caught them. Quite the opposite in many cases. Chasing prey triggered instincts in the Lycan men which were remarkably similar to the instinct to chase down and capture their mate, which would likely be fine with most of the bunnies if they were less terrified. The bunnies also like to chase their mates around. So, are you willing to take on the job? It starts after school, and we have dinner prepared for the staff as well as study rooms, so that you don't miss out on your schoolwork. If you would like to think on it for the night, you can come by tomorrow morning before class and see what we have. Lucille nodded. I think that we have a few others who might want to work there full-time. They're a bit older, but they'll be happy for the work. We do need day shift workers, so you can send them by, or let me know who they are and I'll reach out. Lucille smiled. I will talk to them. They'll listen to me. Chapter 1778. Incremental Gains. While Min went looking for employees, Carl had the new runecrafters gathered in the guild house, facing a whiteboard, which he had covered in essential runic phrases for basic magical items. They were all ones that worked well together, or could be added to other phrases as a modifier to give items a specific bonus. Alright, this is the single most common runic phrase that you'll be using. I know that the system taught you to read the basic runic languages, so you should all see that it simply says Titanic Strength. However, simply writing it wherever will not be as effective as proper placement. If you're writing it on a ring, you want the full enchantment to make even loops so that there are no empty gaps in the phrasing. So, this is the first thing that we will practice. All the warriors of every clan want these, unless they have better. So, you can sell a ton of them to the traders. On your tables are a bunch of wooden rings. Pick one that you like. It doesn't matter the size. They will adapt to the bonded wearer. So, pick one that you think you can write the runes on well. They've all got flat outer rings, for easier practice. Getting the runes just right on a curved surface takes more practice. The Lycans picked up the rings and memorized the 4 runes that made up the enchantment. That was one for every quarter of the ring, evenly spaced. It was not difficult, even without practice writing the language. Slowly, they carved the simple wooden rings, careful not to mess up any of the stroke orders for the runes that they were carving. That was one of the great dangers of rune crafting, the Lycans decided. There were many runes that were nearly identical, but carved in a different direction, so one end of the stroke was wider than the other. By basic layout, they were identical, but by width of the lines they were not, and it was easy to make a mistake as to what you were writing if you messed up the order. However, for many of the Lycans, they never actually wrote much of anything. They could read just fine, and sent system messages regularly. But physically writing? That was for nerds and mages. Not for the average Lycan warrior. Carl knew how most of them felt about the situation, and that was why most of the warriors hadn't signed up for the runecrafting option. It was mostly elders and druids in here. That wasn't a bad thing. You didn't want all the protectors to be inside creating gear when there was an attack. But you couldn't cut them out entirely, or they would just end up poor. Well, normally. The guild was very generous with giving out fun stuff, and the pack was even more so, as they viewed it as the duty of the group to ensure that everyone had everything that they actually needed. So, gear would go to the warriors because they need gear. It would go to the mages so things got done with magic, and to the druids to keep the gardens and forests healthy. Then whatever you made on top of what it cost to keep the pack running was yours. Now that they were in the Darklight Host, it would quickly stop being a concern. The items they would sell would cover all of everyone's expenses and more, so money would quickly become meaningless, and it would be the same as in the mortal world, all about the coolest new things. Custom items tailored to your class were the peak of Darklight Host wish lists. Even now, while they made their very first item, an uncommon grade ring of Titanic Strength, many of the pack members were already dreaming of the day that they had good enough mastery of runecrafting to make themselves custom items with bonuses for their favorite skills, or the ability to use a spell that they could never master. That last one was easier said than done, but it was still the dream. Carl watched as everyone finished their rings, and a few had to start over after making a mistake. It was easy to mess up, but he had made all the wooden rings in about 10 seconds, so it wasn't any real loss if a bit of wood got damaged. Branch leader, we've got the rings done. What comes next? Do we practice with more? Elder Blackwood asked. Nope. You've done so well that we're going to move on to a compound phrase that every warrior wants. There are 2 options this time, and you can pick whichever you like. We'll give them to the pack, if they need them, or trade them to Elder Malcolm to sell on the merchant ships. The options are adding skill damage to Titanic Strength or adding agility. The Lycan's ears literally perked up at the thought. Just adding some or a lot of strength wasn't bad. But strength and skill damage was a great combination. Perhaps not for the senior warriors, who got that good or better from dungeons. but for the students and the younger Lycans. The layout was also simple. You had to change the spacing, but it was all still one sentence and you didn't need to do anything fancy with it. That was why Carl had picked these combinations. Ease the new crafters into the basics first, and then spend a few weeks building up their skills and the guild's stockpile of loot, before they moved on to epic-grade items and made-to-order pieces. The mass-produced, just good enough type items were the backbone of any guild store. If they didn't have the basics, they didn't have a store. It had to be good enough that visitors would want it and come here to get it, but not so expensive that they would struggle to find anything to trade for it. In the Immortal Worlds, the prices for good things were always in other goods, unless you were in the same clan, which made everything difficult. Unless, of course, you were dealing with the Darklight host, who would take nearly anything on trade. Chapter 1779. Ray deserves minions. While the guild worked on their first few projects, Carl began to write out more basic designs on the board. There were a few that always sold well no matter where you were or who you were dealing with. The strength and skill damage combo was a given. That's why they started with it. But enchanting items for mana storage was even less common and more valuable here in the Immortal Worlds than it was back home. In the Mortal Realm, everyone just assumed it was a mage thing, so if they needed it, they went to the mages. Here, entire sects were based around a single combat style, and they viewed this sort of energy storage item as a rare relic that the dungeons rarely dropped. They never considered that there was likely someone out there who could make it. In fact, many of them wouldn't even think to ask, as they hated the thought of relying on another sect for goods. That was a hurdle that the Darklight host was going to have to overcome if they were going to build their clientele. Having what people needed was great within the New Home Merchant clan, but that was only about 10,000 people who would actively want new gear. If they truly wanted to expand their market, even as much as the Drod Guild House, they were going to have to attract other clans. Drod, at its peak, was nearly 200,000 people. Sure, they were on a whole different power scale, but when you were looking at volume of sales, they had it covered. Even with competitors all over town, the Darklight host had done amazingly well. That's what Carl wanted for the branch here. It didn't seem like too much to ask that they should be able to get customers at least from the city of Condom, and perhaps even from the other major towns in the region. As he recalled, they should be Forvamiras and Kikirinha. Whoever named that last one was a masochist, he thought. But the majority of the new home just called the mortals there the Irina sect, which was much more pronounceable. Asking for customers from the Almixii sect was likely too much. They weren't too much further away than Tel Justo, though they were on the south coast of the peninsula. But they were a massive clan, and claimed over 250,000 immortal residents of their city, all ostensibly in the same sect. They spent a lot of time training and kept a standing army to enforce their will over the region. That had been questioned recently, in their opinion, as the Gralpedran Templars marched straight through their territory to get to the New Home clan, and it had made them touchy about the subject. They took that as a direct slight to their authority, especially when other clans were going to join in without so much as speaking to them. They didn't care to protect the new home, as they had only a surface-level agreement with both sides. But they simply couldn't tolerate that anyone in the region would think that they could do as they pleased and entirely ignore their power. "Are these our next assignments?" one of the Lycans asked. Carl shook his head. "Not exactly. They're the items most likely to be bestsellers in the store, instead of the best items to ship off to the clan for export." The elders smiled at each other, and one of the old men cleared his throat. "You know, we have a number of young men in need of employment. Do you perhaps have the ability to impart weapon and armor-making skills the way that you did for runecrafting?" "I can do leatherworking. I don't have the forge skills to impart blacksmithing, but we do have guild members in Immortal World that can help make the gear if we supply the materials. I know that's not optimal for the pack, but I can certainly get you some leatherworkers to make light armor." The elder smiled. "That will be perfect. Many of us have carving skills, learned from passing time whittling wood on the porch. So, we can make quality wooden goods with magically produced wood. An advantage of having many druids. But our leatherworkers are not at the same sort of level, and they're not in the runecrafting group either. So, helping them keep up will be important." Carl nodded. "You can also work together. If they finish a piece, and then don't finalize it with a system, You can add runes to it to improve the quality and specify certain buffs.
Oh, synergy.
A very proper druidic concept. I like it. Should we call them here now? They've got lots of leather prepared, so if you can train them, they will be able to turn out whole new armor sets for the new home in only a few days. Carl nodded. I will do the skill transfer, and then Lady Ray will help them with new designs. She is the specialist in both design and armor making. The Lycans looked a bit dubious about it, but they had seen the silk that the spider had produced, and she definitely had the knack for fashion. If that could extend to making leather armor, they would be incredibly popular. Most people wore a robe over their armor because the best pieces were usually mismatched or just plain ugly. If they could make improved sets that actually looked good, people would show them off, and it would help their reputation. No longer would people look down on the Blackwoods pack, and their safety would improve along with the reputation of the Darklight host. The armorers came in moments later, accompanied by Ray, who had heard Carl's thoughts as he was talking. Unlike Opal, who was busy making sure that the people in the tiny world were doing well and enjoying the chaos that had resulted from giving random skills to bunnies, Ray had been focusing on her crafting. Chapter 1780. The Green Dragon Laughs. Opal thought that she was on the right side of things this time, though. While most of what they had done was perfectly normal, giving the bunnies reality warp had a few slightly unexpected side effects. Other than the class awakening. A few minutes after they had used their first skill, using reality warp to create bunny goddess statues to decorate their living spaces, the system had triggered a forced evolution. And then the evolution had triggered a class change. Lotus was watching it all with great joy, but the bunnies were still trying to fully understand what had happened. The class that they had awakened was Artist, which seemed perfectly generic and perfect for what they had wanted to do with their lives. But when they actually used Reality Warp to activate their class skill of Fine Art, it had forcibly changed them. They were now officially considered Void Bunnies, which looked like normal bunnies, but had Reality Warp as an innate racial skill, which cost no mana to activate. It was both amazing and incredibly confusing. The bunnies were used to daydreaming about things that they would like to have if only they were real people, immortals who had rights and freedom. Those daydreaming sessions had faded since they were taken in by the Darklight host, but the first time that it happened after evolution, the dream came true. What had been a normal bedroom became a stone den, complete with a collection of fine art on the walls, super soft blankets that were like sleeping on a cloud, and a golem assistant that looked suspiciously like Thor with bunny ears. The bunny had come running out, trying to explain what had happened. Then, she was followed by the shirtless buff bunny man, and Lotus had nearly fallen out of her chair laughing. The green dragon had seen this one coming, letting the oppressed alter reality at what was bound to be chaos, and the first time that a bunny had a daydream, she had accidentally made it reality before learning how to control her abilities. At least it wasn't a lewd dream, Opal suggested. Oh, that would be not good. So not good, the bunny realized. Or very, very good. It depends on how you look at it. But if you made it, you can just change it back. It's not a big deal. But maybe keep your long-eared friend. He's giving you a promising sort of look. The bunny blushed and giggled, while her friends whistled encouragement at her. Hey, it's not like that. I was just daydreaming of the perfect den. And the perfect den comes with a 2-meter-tall, super buff boyfriend? I don't really go for boys, but I can see the appeal, Lotus giggled. Ophelia patted her on the head and helped the priestess sit upright. Then, she handed Tifa to Lotus to keep her occupied, instead of having her run off to examine something that the bunnies had done. What is your new class? Ophelia asked, wondering what sort of path the Void Bunnies were going to be on. It calls me a doll maker. I think that it's a form of sculpting class. All the skills appear to be related to making dolls, but a few of them seem a bit strange, almost evil. Evil dolls? Oh, there was a story about that at the Seminary Academy, Lotus realized. I mean, the doll isn't exactly evil, but how it's made seems that way. I don't know. Perhaps it's a normal thing for immortals? But the final skill in that branch of the skill tree is to trap a human soul in a doll body to make some sort of undead construct that has a person's mind. Ophelia blinked slowly, while Lotus frowned. I can see how that would have the potential to be evil. But it could also be like a Lich Lord's phylactery. Like, if their body gets destroyed, they could move to the doll until they can be properly resurrected. It would keep their soul from dissipating. The bunnies hadn't thought about it that way. It could be used to save lives. However, in the early stages, their class wasn't all that impressive. The dolls could only move under their direct supervision, and they had much less autonomy than even a basic golem. They couldn't act on their own, couldn't guard a space like a gargoyle, couldn't even speak. But they could make them out of nothing with a skill, which was pretty cool. If they used it to make statues, it was still a valuable skill, and they could trade them to the runecrafters to make them into something better. Or they could use them as target dummies for the baby dragons. They were mythic ranked by default, thanks to growing up in the immortal realms. So, they could make dolls that were strong enough that the kids didn't tear them up immediately. Making a fake army for them to practice attacking would be good training for the whelps. It wasn't the generic art class that they had originally received, but they still had the basic painting skills and art bonuses that they got from the previous class, so they could paint well enough, even if their class specialized in dolls. What sort of progression does your class even have? I mean, that guy is not from your class. You made him with your racial ability. So, what does your class do? Ophelia asked. Oh, the first skill I'll be able to get is to make voodoo dolls, to curse people. Then to see through the eyes of the dolls, and a skill to make them move. I have to do it manually, but it'll be a super cool creepy party trick. Most of the skills seem to be related to creating area effects around a doll, either for me to observe an area, or to curse an area. There is even one further up to make the dolls march forward and explode. That was different for certain.